Hello, my name is Jennifer Engel, and I am the author of Heaven Under Construction, which I wrote in 2014 and was published in 2017 by Balboa Press. And what I'm doing, basically what Heaven Under Construction is it is a book of poetry. I wrote one poem for every day that I had cancer back in 2014 when I first found out, when I was going through the double mastectomy, when I was going through the chemotherapy, when I had my port, when I went through the radiation. And I thought it would be interesting as we approach Breast Cancer Awareness Month for me to do something that I call reflective poetry. For those of you who don't know, I was told that my cancer has recurred for a third time. And so I thought it would be kind of interesting to kind of pick some poems of what I was going through back then and do reflective poetry as to what I'm going through now. And then at the end of this video, I'm going to share some notes or some ideas that I have about some other videos coming up that might actually help people who are going through the process. So the poem that I chose today is called Day 30 in my book, Today is the Day. And the reason why I chose that poem is this was the day just before I was going to start chemotherapy. And last week I started my new treatment, which I'm going to be talking about in this poem. So I thought that would be a really good reflection piece. Day 30. Today is the day. Cancer is a roller coaster. The anticipation of waiting in line, nervousness mixed with positivity. I can do this. Up, 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 waiting to reach the top, and then stomach drops, plummeted down suddenly. Today is the day. Chemo. It was dumb to Google what it would be like. A sharp turn whips me from positive to negative. Close my eyes, keep focused on faith. Now here is today's poem, September 3rd. So I actually am writing it from September 3rd, a week ago. I was going to post reflective poetry last week, but I got kind of busy. So I'm going to do two poems today, one to make up for last week and one for this week, because these poems actually go together really well. September 3rd, 2021. Do you have any questions? Cancer is still a roller coaster, the anticipation of waiting in line. I wait on the phone for the pharmacist as she describes my new meds. Ibrance, 100 milligrams. I can't even pronounce this other one. 25 milligrams. May cause fatigue, nausea, bone pain, hair loss, mouth sores, diarrhea, anemia, and more. Tomorrow is day 1. I tell the pharmacist no one will steal this from me because no one wants it. A sharp turn whips me from positive to negative. I collapse and cry for 5 to 10 minutes, then move on. Positive distractions help. Hashtag keep the faith. All right. So now I'm going to go into the other poem, Day 31, Back to Heaven Under Construction, 2014, Not So Bad. 1980s movies about cancer terrify my mind. The idea of what chemo is and how I'd react, but I'm glad to say it wasn't like that. The nurse's goal was to have me feeling like I did when I walked through the door. True to her words, Nurse Nancy left me feeling just fine. Dare I say chemo wasn't so bad and was more social than I ever could have imagined? No. Anyone who's been through chemo knows that day 1 isn't so bad. it's day 10, day 15, day 20 that really sucks. Now, I'm not gonna lie, there were times, losing your hair, that is not fun. Crawling to the bathroom because you really just don't feel so good. Yeah, that was interesting. But that was day 31, and then you can see all the other days after that in this book. And what's kind of interesting is day 1 was last week, and I have been on my 2 meds for a week now, and so here's my perception of them so far. Day 1 through 7, not so bad. Googling the data on these new drugs is still dumb. But the review of the ones who took it before me helped. Kinda. I'm still glad to say it is still okay on day 1 through 7. Mostly minimal side effects, minus 1 day of diarrhea. Hummus doesn't seem to agree. Bone pain returning in lower spine and left hip. Let's see what happens in weeks 2 and 3. Alright, I wanted to give a little bit of background information on where I came up with the title for the book, Heaven Under Construction. So I got the idea for Heaven Under Construction because during that time I was driving on my way to work and many of the roads were actually under construction. And I was also kind of moving from a really chaotic time in my life, a turbulent time in my life, to a more like grounded and centered one. And then just when I found out that I was doing that, I was told that I had cancer. Now, I think I refound my faith just before going through this because I'm really not sure if I could have gotten through this without my faith. And so that's kind of where the title came from, Heaven, because I was kind of like refining my faith during that time, but it was under construction, just like the roads were on my way to work. But toward the end of this journey, I kind of came up with some mnemonic devices of things that helped me toward the end deal with, what I was left with at the end. Stopping, I actually use like the signs that you often see when you see construction to create my mnemonic devices. So I'll be talking about stopping one weekend, I'll be talking about going slow, I'll be talking about taking a detour, I'll be talking about focusing on your breath, and then I'll also be talking about still hanging on to hope. Then after that, in November and December, I'll start talking about some of the strategies that I used to create highest possibility states. Because one of the things that they don't really tell you about cancer, well, a couple of things they don't really tell you about cancer, is that it's not just like when all of the treatment is done, you're good. I found that it left a lot of post-traumatic stress syndrome. You're dealing with all of these different emotions. They don't really tell you that it can keep recurring. And so I used and developed all my strategies to deal with those types of things, recovering physically, mentally, and emotionally, and I put all of those into highest possibility states. So, because what I've also found with like recovery and things like that is you can't just take the pills, okay? I am not, this is my disclaimer, I am not a licensed doctor, I'm not a licensed counselor or anything like that, but I am a special education teacher for over 20 years. And I'm also just a spiritual explorer. Like, I've explored so many different spiritualities, I've done deep dives into religious texts, I've explored quantum physics concepts. Like, I've just learned and learned and learned and learned. And I've really come to the belief that if you just take the pill, you're really only dealing with about 25% of the issue, okay? They don't really talk about in the doctor's office that the other 75% is like a pie, right? So you also have to deal with all the mental stuff you went through when you went through cancer. You also had to deal with all the emotional stuff that you went through cancer, and all the stuff you put into your subconscious or that might have tested your faith when you went through that. And not only that, but when you're done with all of the treatments, you don't realize that sometimes you're going to have to keep dealing with this again and again and again. And we could either see that as being super scary, but the way that I've decided to do it, again, one of the tips and strategies that I have in Highest Possibility States, is that I do something called script flipping. I do something called walking through your fear, and we practice mindfulness, meditation, and visualization and learning. That's one of the key strategies in here. And so when I hear these things, I walk through my fear a lot more quickly. I flip the script rather than seeing it as something to always be afraid of, to always be scared of. I'm looking at it more like my thyroid is kind of broken as well, and I have to take thyroid medicine to manage that and to give me my best health. Rather than seeing that I always have to go through dramatic, traumatic treatments, I look at taking my medicine as just managing my cancer instead of being cured of cancer, because I think if you have the mindset that you're going to be cured of cancer every time it recurs, then you're going to keep having these dramatic and traumatic emotions that are related to it. But if you see it more as just something to be managed, and as science is advancing and they're coming up with better strategies of managing it, then I think it makes it, at least for me, easier to deal with. I hope you join me for the rest of the videos for September and October, where I first teach some of the strategies at the end of this book that are also related to kind of those construction signs of stopping, going slow, taking a detour, and focusing on your breath and hope. And then moving into November and December, where I start talking about other strategies that once you're actually done with cancer and now you have to recover physically, mentally, emotionally. Now, I don't really deal with the physical aspect of that. I do have quizzes that I'm going to send out so you can see which area you want to focus on. I focus mostly on the mental, the emotional, and the subconscious piece of that, the 75%. So not only might you want to work with your doctors, but you also might want to work with nutritionists and personal trainers and things like that for the other 25%. That is not my expertise there. I am a little bit more experienced in the mental, emotional, and subconscious aspect because I was a special education teacher for over 20 years. I did receive a lot of training in regard to those areas, and then I've also just done lots of my own personal study, and that's what I applied to in this book. So I hope you join me. I hope the idea of this reflective poetry doesn't just help me, but also this is something you could do if you're going through cancer or anything scary, anything negative. You could write out all your fears, your concerns. It doesn't have to be poetry. It could be a bulleted list. And then on the other side, flip the script. That is one of the things that I practice. And, in the past, I used to see things as dramatic and traumatic, and it would take me a long time to get over it. Now, when I heard about all of those side effects that my medicine could cause, and I was super scared and super worried, I was kind of over it in about 10 minutes, and then I moved on. So these strategies actually really do work. I hope that you have a great weekend, and I will see you next time, and I hope that your days are filled with peace and blessings.